So I'm going to start this with something that might sound dramatic, but I promise you it's not. There are people walking around right now who experience the world in a fundamentally different way than you do. And I don't mean like they prefer different music or have different political views. I mean their entire internal wiring is different. You know how when you hurt someone, you feel bad about it? There's this automatic thing that happens where you feel guilt, shame, or at least some kind of discomfort. For most people, that's just how being human works. But there's a subset of the population where that mechanism doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's so weak that it might as well not be there. And the crazy part is that these people have learned to mimic normal human responses so well that you can't tell. They've studied what people expect to see, and they perform it. They say the right things, make the right facial expressions, know when to apologize, show concern, and to act caring. But underneath? Nothing. Or at least, nothing like what you're experiencing when you do those things. This isn't me being cynical or dramatic. This is actual research. Psychology has identified what they call the dark triad. 3 overlapping personality patterns that show up in people who cause massive damage in relationships, in workplaces, in families. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Now, before your eyes glaze over thinking this is going to be some clinical psychology lecture, hang with me. Because understanding these patterns might explain that relationship that destroyed you. That boss who made your life hell. That family member who's been messing with your head since childhood. That friend who always seems to create drama, but somehow you're always the one apologizing. Let me break down what these 3 things are, because they overlap, but they're not identical. Narcissism is when someone has this inflated sense of their own importance, needs constant admiration, and lacks empathy for other people. But here's what makes it confusing. Narcissists often don't seem arrogant on the surface. Some of them do, sure, but a lot of them have learned that overt arrogance doesn't get them what they want. So they've adapted. They play the victim. They act humble while subtly making everything about them. They fish for compliments instead of demanding them outright. I knew this woman, Lynn, who seemed incredibly selfless. Always helping people, always involved in charitable stuff, always posting about causes she cared about. And everyone thought she was amazing. But if you paid attention, every single act of kindness came with a performance. She'd help you and then tell everyone about it. She'd volunteer and then post 30 photos. She needed an audience for her goodness. And if you needed something from her that didn't come with social credit, suddenly she was too busy. That's covert narcissism. It looks like generosity, but it's actually just a different strategy to get the same thing all narcissists want, which is attention and admiration. Machiavellianism is all about manipulation and strategy. These people see relationships as transactions. They're constantly calculating what they can get from you. Everything is a game, and they're playing chess while you think you're just having a conversation with them. The Machiavellian person doesn't necessarily need to be the center of attention like a narcissist does. They're fine operating behind the scenes. What they want is control and advantage. They'll lie without hesitation if it serves them. They'll betray you if the math works out in their favor. And they don't feel bad about it because they genuinely don't see anything wrong with it. To them, everyone's playing the same game. You're just playing it badly if you're being honest and trusting. I had a roommate in my 20s who was like this. She'd tell different people different stories, always positioning herself as the victim or the hero depending on what got her what she wanted. She borrowed money from multiple friends with sob stories, never paid anyone back, and when confronted, she'd flip it somehow so you felt guilty for asking. She'd use information people told her in confidence as leverage later. Everything was currency to her. People were just resources. Psychopathy is the scariest one because it's the most extreme. Psychopaths have almost no emotional response to other people's suffering. Where narcissists need admiration and Machiavellians want control, psychopaths just want stimulation. They get bored easily, take risks, and can be charming as hell because they've learned to fake emotions convincingly, but there's nothing behind it. The thing about psychopaths is they're not all serial killers, even though that's what people think of. Most psychopaths are just out there in normal life, causing chaos. They're the person who has a trail of destroyed relationships, but never seems affected by it. The business person who ruins companies and walks away without a second thought. Or also the partner who cheats repeatedly and feels nothing except maybe annoyance at getting caught. These three traits overlap a lot. Someone can be high in all three, which creates this perfect storm of manipulative, attention-seeking, and emotionally dead behavior. Or they might be high in one and moderate in others. But the common thread is this. These people are fundamentally self-serving, they lack empathy, and they're good at hiding it. And that last part is what makes them so dangerous. They've learned what normal people expect to see, and they perform it convincingly. My friend James dated someone who, looking back, was clearly high in all three traits. But at the time, she seemed perfect, attentive, caring, and interested in his life. She said all the right things and presented herself as someone who'd been hurt before and was looking for something real. Classic move, by the way, playing the wounded bird. 6 months in, things started to crack. Little lies that didn't make sense and stories that changed. Times when her empathy just shut off completely and she'd say something shockingly cold. But by then, he was hooked. He'd invested. He'd fallen for the performance. And she was good at pulling him back whenever he started to distance himself. It took him 2 years to get out and another year to fully understand what had happened. Because when you're dealing with someone from the dark triad, they mess with your reality. You start doubting yourself, start thinking you're the problem, and start believing their version of events even when it contradicts what you saw with your own eyes. And that's what we're going to unpack over the next hour. Not just what these people are, but how they operate. The specific tactics they use. Why smart, capable people fall for it. And most importantly, how to protect yourself and get out if you're already trapped. You can't fix these people. You can't love them into changing. You can't be patient enough or understanding enough or supportive enough to make them develop empathy. That's not how this works. Their wiring is different, and the best thing you can do is understand the game they're playing so you stop playing it with them. If you are new here and this is the first time seeing my channel or a returning viewer, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more video. Let's get started. Alright, so now that you understand what we're dealing with, let's talk about the specific tools these people use. Because it's not random. There are patterns, techniques, and things that work over and over again because they exploit normal human psychology. You've probably heard this term thrown around a lot. People use it for any kind of lying now, but gaslighting is more specific and more insidious than just regular lying. Gaslighting is when someone manipulates you into questioning your own perception of reality. They don't just lie about facts. They lie about what you experienced, what you said, what happened, until you start doubting your own memory and sanity. Here's how it works in practice. Let's say your partner says something cruel to you. You get upset and you bring it up later. They say, "I never said that." You're making things up. Not, "I don't remember saying that," or "I didn't mean it that way." They flat out deny it happened and imply you're crazy or lying. Or maybe they did say it, but now they claim you're taking it out of context. You're being too sensitive, overreacting, or you're remembering it wrong. And they say this with such confidence that you start to wonder, did I misunderstand? Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I did take it wrong. And that's the goal. To make you doubt yourself so much that you stop trusting your own perceptions and start relying on theirs. I watched this happen to my sister with her ex. He'd make plans with her, then cancel last minute. When she'd get frustrated, he'd say they never made plans. She was confused. She'd check her texts, and there it was, confirmation that they'd made plans. She'd show him. He'd say, "That's not what that means," or "You're interpreting that wrong," or "I said maybe, not definitely." After months of this, she stopped trusting herself. She started recording conversations and started screenshotting texts. She became paranoid because she couldn't trust her own memory anymore. And that's exactly what gaslighting does. It turns you into someone who doubts everything about their own experience. The worst part? Gaslighters often accuse you of gaslighting them. They flip it. You bring up something they did, they get defensive and say you're trying to manipulate them, you're rewriting history, or you're the one who can't be trusted. Now you're defending yourself instead of addressing the original issue. So they've successfully shifted the entire dynamic. This is a cycle that happens in relationships with narcissists, and it's devastating because of how extreme the contrast is. Love bombing is when someone comes on strong at the beginning. I'm talking about overwhelming amounts of attention, affection, gifts, compliments, and time. They make you feel like you're the most special person in the world. They mirror your interests. They seem perfect for you. They talk about the future really fast, being soulmates, moving in together, marriage, and kids. Whatever it is, they're accelerating intimacy at a speed that feels very intoxicating. And it is intoxicating. Your brain is flooded with dopamine and oxytocin. You feel high. This is the best relationship you've ever had. This person gets you like no one else ever has. But here's the thing. Love bombing isn't about genuine connection. It's about creating dependency. They're building this incredible high so that when they pull it away, which they will, the crash is brutal. You try harder, bend more, and you ignore your own needs trying to get back to that initial high. And that's exactly what they want. Now you're chasing their approval, working for scraps of the attention they gave freely before. My friend dated someone who did this textbook perfectly. First 2 months were insane. Constant texting, daily dates, met each other's families, talking about moving to another city together. She'd never felt so connected to someone. Month 3, and he started pulling back. Said he needed space. Hill critical about little things and started comparing her to his ex in unflattering ways. She was devastated and kept trying to figure out what she'd done wrong so as to fix it. Then he'd randomly give her a day of the old treatment. Sweet, attentive, and loving. Just enough to give her hope that things were getting back to normal. Then he'd go back to his cold and critical self again. This cycle went on for a year before she finally broke. And even then, he tried to love bomb her back. Showed up with flowers, letters, promises to change. And she almost fell for it again because that initial high was so powerful. That's the cycle. Love bombing to hook you. Devaluation to keep you working for approval. Random reinforcement to keep you addicted. That's not love. It's serious conditioning. This one is evil. Triangulation is when someone brings a third person into the dynamic to manipulate you. Could be an ex they keep mentioning. Could be a friend they're inappropriately close with. Could be a coworker. Doesn't matter who it is. What matters is they use that person to make you jealous, insecure, or to play you off against each other. They'll compare you to this person. They'll tell you things this person said about you. They'll make you compete for their attention. They'll create drama between you and this third person so they can sit back and enjoy the chaos. I knew someone who did this with his girlfriend and his best friend, who was a woman. He'd constantly talk about how close they were, how she understood him, how they had this special bond. When his girlfriend expressed discomfort, he'd accuse her of being insecure and jealous. He'd say she was trying to control who he could be friends with. But then he'd also complain to the best friend about his girlfriend. Make her sound unreasonable, jealous, difficult. So now the best friend thought the girlfriend was the problem. And the girlfriend knew the best friend was judging her. He had them both competing for his validation, both feeling insecure, both blaming each other instead of seeing that he was orchestrating the whole thing. That's triangulation, using other people as pawns to maintain control and create insecurity. This is an acronym that stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's a manipulation tactic where someone who's been called out for bad behavior flips the entire situation. Here's how it plays out. You confront them about something they did, something clear, something you have evidence for. Their response goes through these stages. First, denial. I didn't do that. That didn't happen. You're wrong. When denial doesn't work because you have proof, they attack. You're crazy. You're manipulative. You're always starting drama. You're the problem here. And finally, they reverse it. Now they're the victim and you're the offender. I can't believe you're attacking me like this. I've been nothing but good to you, and this is how you treat me. You're abusive. Suddenly you're defending yourself. You're apologizing. You're trying to prove you're not the bad guy. The original issue is completely forgotten. They've successfully made it about how you hurt them by bringing up what they did. This happened to someone I know in a work situation. She reported her boss for inappropriate behavior. Clear stuff. Things other people had witnessed. His response was textbook Darvo. Denied it happened. Then said she was a troublemaker who was trying to sabotage him because she was bitter about not getting promoted. Then filed a complaint against her for harassment and creating a hostile work environment. She ended up having to defend herself instead of him facing consequences. He played the victim so convincingly that some people believed him. That's how effective Darvo is. This is borrowed from behavioral psychology, and it's probably the most powerful tool in the manipulation toolkit. Intermittent reinforcement is when rewards or positive behavior come randomly and unpredictably. Studies have shown this creates the strongest form of behavioral conditioning. Stronger than consistent rewards. Stronger than consistent punishment. Think about gambling. Slot machines don't pay out every time. They pay out randomly. That randomness is what makes them addictive. Your brain is always chasing the next hit, never knowing when it's coming. Narcissists use this in relationships. They're not consistently terrible. If they were, you'd leave. They're terrible sometimes, wonderful other times, and you never know which version you're getting. So you stay, hoping the good version will show up. Chasing those moments of kindness or affection like someone chasing a jackpot. After they've been cruel, they might suddenly be sweet. Buy you something. Say something loving. Give you a glimpse of the person you fell for. And that hit of positive reinforcement after all the negative makes the positive feel even more powerful. Your brain lights up. This is it. Things are getting better. He's changing. She's trying. But then it goes back to negative. And you're confused, hurt, trying to figure out what you did to cause the shift. And the cycle continues. Random positive, stretches of negative, random positive again. You become addicted to the relationship the same way someone becomes addicted to gambling. This is why people stay in obviously toxic relationships way longer than makes logical sense. They're not stupid. They're not weak. They're conditioned. The intermittent reinforcement has created a powerful psychological bond that's incredibly hard to break. This one shows up constantly with people high in dark triad traits. Projection is when someone accuses you of the exact things they're doing. The cheater accuses you of cheating. The liar says you're the one who can't be trusted. The manipulator says you're manipulative. The person with no empathy tells you you're cold and uncaring. It serves multiple purposes. First, it deflects attention from their behavior. You're so busy defending yourself from false accusations that you're not focusing on what they're actually doing. Second, it plants doubt. Maybe you start wondering if you are those things they're accusing you of. Third, it allows them to justify their behavior. I lied because you lie all the time even though you don't. I had a friend whose partner was constantly accusing her of flirting with other guys. getting angry about how she dressed, who she talked to, how friendly she was with people. She started dressing more conservatively, avoiding male friends, constantly reassuring him she wasn't interested in anyone else. Turned out he was cheating the entire time. The accusations were projection. He was doing what he was accusing her of, and putting it on her served the double purpose of keeping her defensive and justifying his own behavior in his mind. Once you know to look for projection, you see it everywhere. The boss who calls employees lazy while barely working. The parent who accuses their kid of being selfish while demanding everything revolve around them. The friend who says you're always creating drama while they're the ones stirring the pot. This term comes from the Wizard of Oz, and it refers to people the narcissist recruits to do their dirty work. These are the people who start harassing you on the narcissist's behalf, who tell you you're being too hard on them, who make excuses for their behavior, who pressure you to forgive and forget, who spread the narcissist's version of events to your mutual friends. Flying monkeys are usually people the narcissist has manipulated. They believe the narcissist is the victim. They think they're helping by intervening. They don't realize they're being used as tools. Sometimes flying monkeys are knowing participants, people who benefit from staying in the narcissist's good graces or who enjoy the drama. But often they're well-meaning people who've been fed a false narrative. When you leave a narcissistic relationship, flying monkeys often increase. The narcissist sends them after you. Your mutual friends start telling you the narcissist is devastated, really wants to change, misses you. Your family members say you're being unforgiving. The narcissist's family attacks you on social media. This is coordinated. The narcissist is playing victim to these people and sending them to wear you down. And it's effective because now you're not just dealing with the narcissist. You're dealing with multiple people telling you you're wrong. The only way to handle flying monkeys is to stop engaging. Don't justify, explain, or try to convince them of your side. They're operating on false information, and they're invested in a narrative you can't easily dismantle. Walk away from those relationships too if you have to. After love bombing, devaluation, and cycles of abuse, there's often a final phase called the discard. This is when the narcissist is done with you and discards you with shocking coldness. Maybe they've found new supply, or someone else to give them the attention they crave, or you finally set boundaries they can't manipulate around. Maybe you're just no longer useful to them. Whatever the reason, the discard is brutal. Someone who claimed to love you suddenly treats you like you don't exist. No empathy, no acknowledgement of the relationship you had, no closure. You're just done. And often they'll make sure the discard hurts as much as possible. They'll start a new relationship immediately and flaunt it. They'll spread rumors about why things ended, painting themselves as the victim. They'll ghost you completely after years together. The discard messes people up because it's so incongruent with everything that came before. How can someone who said you were their soulmate now treat you like garbage? How can someone who knew everything about you now act like you meant nothing? Because to them, you didn't. You were supply and you served a function. When you stopped serving that function, they moved on with zero emotional consequence. And that's the hardest part to accept. It means that the entire relationship meant something completely different to them than it did to you. So here's the question everyone asks themselves after getting out of a relationship with someone from the dark triad. How did I fall for this? I'm not stupid. I'm educated, successful, capable. How did I not see it? And that's exactly the wrong question, because it assumes intelligence protects you. It doesn't. In some ways, intelligence makes you more vulnerable because you rationalize, you give the benefit of the doubt, you try to understand and fix things. Let me tell you why smart, capable, empathetic people end up trapped in these dynamics. First, there's trauma bonding. This is different from regular bonding. Regular bonding happens through positive shared experiences, mutual respect, genuine connection. Trauma bonding happens through cycles of abuse and positive reinforcement. Remember intermittent reinforcement? That creates trauma bonding. The relationship becomes a series of highs and lows. The lows are terrible: anxiety, fear, pain, and confusion. The highs are relief, affection, and hope. And that combination creates an incredibly strong attachment. Your nervous system gets conditioned. The person who hurts you is also the person who soothes you. The person who creates the problem is the person who occasionally solves it. Your brain starts associating them with both pain and relief, which creates a powerful, confusing bond. I've talked to people who got out of narcissistic relationships and started dating healthy people, and their common reaction was, "It feels boring." Not that the person was boring, but because their nervous system had gotten addicted to the chaos. Healthy felt flat by comparison because there was no dramatic cycle of pain and relief. That's trauma bonding. And it's not weakness. It's neurobiology. Your brain has been conditioned through a very effective, if unintentional, behavior modification process. This is particularly common in empathetic people, and honestly, narcissists can smell it from a mile away. The savior complex is when you believe you can fix someone. You see their pain, their childhood trauma, their struggles, and you think, "I can be the one who helps them. I can love them enough to heal them." Narcissists and people from the dark triad often present themselves as wounded. They've had such a hard life. Their ex was crazy. Their family didn't understand them. They've been hurt so many times. And your empathetic heart wants to be different, wants to be the one who sees the good in them and brings it out. The thing in all this is that you can't save someone who doesn't think they need saving. You can't heal someone who doesn't believe they're broken. And most importantly, you can't love someone into developing a capacity they fundamentally lack. The savior complex keeps you in the relationship way past when you should leave, because leaving feels like giving up on them. Like you're the bad guy who couldn't handle their issues. Like you're abandoning someone who needs you. My friend stayed with someone emotionally abusive for 4 years because he kept framing his behavior as being from past trauma. Every time he'd lash out, he'd eventually break down crying about his childhood, his ex, his insecurities. And she'd comfort him. She'd think he's working on it. He just needs patience and understanding. But working on it would have meant therapy, actual behavior change, accountability. Instead, he just cycled through hurting her and then explaining why he hurt her in a way that made her feel bad for him instead of herself. That's how the savior complex traps you. You mistake empathy for obligation. You mistake understanding their pain for accepting their behavior. This is a psychological concept that explains why smart people stay in obviously bad situations. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort you feel when you hold two conflicting beliefs. Like, I'm a smart person who makes good decisions, and I'm in a relationship with someone who treats me terribly. Those two beliefs can't both be true comfortably. So your brain tries to resolve the dissonance. And the way it often resolves it is by changing your perception of the situation rather than accepting you made a mistake. You start making excuses. He's under a lot of stress at work. She had a difficult childhood. Things will get better when X happens. He didn't mean it that way. She's going through something. I'm being too sensitive. You rationalize, minimize, and reframe. Anything to resolve the discomfort of admitting you're in a bad situation. Because admitting that means admitting you made a mistake, wasted time, ignored red flags. And that's painful. The longer you're in the relationship, the stronger the cognitive dissonance becomes. You've invested years. You've told everyone this person is great. You've built a life together. Accepting it was all based on lies or manipulation means accepting a massive failure in judgment. So your brain keeps finding ways to make it not be that. This is why people on the outside can see the situation clearly while you can't. They don't have the cognitive dissonance. They don't need to protect their self-image as someone who makes good choices. They can see it for what it is. Related to cognitive dissonance is the sunk cost fallacy. This is when you continue investing in something because of what you've already invested, even when continuing makes no logical sense. You've spent 3 years with this person. You've worked through so many problems. You've forgiven so much. You've built a life together. To leave now feels like wasting all that time and effort. But here's the thing. That time is already gone. You can't get it back whether you stay or leave. The question isn't whether those 3 years were wasted. The question is whether you want to waste 3 more. The sunk cost fallacy keeps people in terrible relationships, bad jobs, failing businesses, and anything where they've already invested significantly. The investment feels like a reason to continue, even when continuing just means more loss. I stayed in a terrible living situation for an extra year because I'd already dealt with my roommate's behavior for a year. Moving felt like admitting that first year was wasted. But staying didn't make that first year matter. It just added another wasted year to the pile. With narcissistic relationships, the sunk cost fallacy is even stronger because of how much you've endured. You've put up with so much. You've been through so many cycles. To leave now feels like all that suffering was for nothing. But staying doesn't give that suffering meaning. It just creates more suffering. Here's a tactical reason smart people get trapped. Narcissists isolate you from your support system. It happens gradually. They don't usually say, "Stop seeing your friends." They do it subtly. They create tension when you make plans with others, guilt trip you, pick fights before you're supposed to see friends or family, and make you feel bad for prioritizing anyone else. Or they badmouth your support system. Your best friend is a bad influence. Your family doesn't understand you. Your coworkers are toxic. They position themselves as the only person who really gets you, really supports you, really loves you. And slowly, you pull back from everyone else. Maybe to avoid the fights. Maybe because you're embarrassed about the relationship and don't want to hear more concern. Maybe because you're exhausted and don't have energy for other relationships. Maybe because they've convinced you those people are the problem. Once you're isolated, you lose perspective and don't have anyone to reality check with. You don't have support to help you leave and also no safety net at all. You become completely dependent on the narcissist for your social and emotional needs, which gives them total control. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of these relationships because isolation makes leaving exponentially harder. You're afraid of being alone. You don't think you have anywhere to go. You've burned bridges or let relationships deteriorate. You feel trapped not just emotionally, but practically. Most people enter relationships operating on the assumption that love is good. Love is trust. That love is caring about someone's well-being. Love means wanting the best for each other. People from the dark triad understand that most people think this way, and they weaponize it. They use "I love you" as a get-out-of-jail-free card. They hurt you, then say they love you, and you're supposed to forgive because love. They use your love for them as leverage. If you really loved me, you'd do this. If you really loved me, you wouldn't question me. They perform love in ways that aren't actually loving. Grand gestures that look good, but don't require emotional labor. Gifts instead of presents. Promises instead of action. Words instead of change. And because you're operating from a framework where love is genuine and precious, you accept these substitutes. You think expressing love means feeling love. You think saying you'll change means actually changing. You think loving someone means they wouldn't deliberately hurt you. But for them, love is just another tool, another word, another manipulation. And your genuine love, your real care and investment, is just something to exploit. This might be the hardest thing to accept. That what you experienced as love was, to them, something else entirely. A transaction, a game, a means to an end. And accepting that means grieving not just the relationship, but the entire reality you thought you shared. All right, we need to go somewhere uncomfortable now. Because up until this point, we've been focusing on the narcissist, the manipulator, the person with dark triad traits. We've been talking about what they do and why you fell for it. But there's a reason these dynamics keep happening to some people and not others. And that reason isn't that you're weak or stupid or broken. The reason is that you have unhealed wounds that make you vulnerable to these patterns. You have a shadow. Carl Jung talked about the shadow as the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or don't want to acknowledge. For people who end up in narcissistic relationships repeatedly, the shadow often contains things like the need for external validation, the fear of abandonment, the inability to tolerate conflict, the compulsion to fix others, the belief that your worth is tied to how much you sacrifice. These aren't bad things necessarily, but when they're unconscious, when you don't recognize them operating, they make you a target. Let's start here because this is probably the most common vulnerability. A lot of people who end up with narcissists have a deep need for external validation. You need someone else to tell you're good, worthy, lovable. This usually comes from childhood. Maybe your parents were critical. Maybe love was conditional on achievement. Maybe you were ignored or neglected. Maybe you had to earn affection by being good, perfect, and helpful. Whatever the origin, you internalize the belief that your worth comes from outside you. From what others think, how others treat you, being chosen, approved of, and praised. And narcissists are experts at finding this wound. During love bombing, they validate you intensely. They make you feel special, seen, chosen. They fill that hole you've been carrying your whole life, but then they pull it away, and you're very desperate to get it back. You'll do anything to feel that validation again. You'll tolerate behavior you never thought you'd tolerate. You'll abandon your own needs and boundaries, because without their validation, you feel worthless. The shadow work here is recognizing that you've outsourced your sense of worth, that you're seeking from another person something that can only come from within, that your need for validation is the hook that keeps you trapped. Healing this doesn't mean not caring what anyone thinks. It means building an internal sense of worth that isn't dependent on someone else's approval. It means being able to validate yourself. It means knowing your value even when someone's treating you like you don't have any. This is related, but slightly different. The abandonment wound is the terror of being left, of being alone. And narcissists trigger this wound constantly. They threaten to leave. They pull away without explanation. They give you the silent treatment. They create insecurity about the relationship. And if you have an abandonment wound, this is absolute torture. You'll do anything to prevent abandonment. You'll apologize for things that weren't your fault. You'll accept unacceptable behavior. You'll ignore your own needs and become whoever they want you to be. Because the alternative of being abandoned feels like death. I've seen people stay in relationships where they're being actively abused because the thought of being alone was more terrifying than the abuse. That's how powerful the abandonment wound is. And here's the shadow aspect. The abandonment wound often comes with the belief that you're fundamentally unlovable, that if someone sees the real you, they'll leave. So you hide parts of yourself. You perform and try to be perfect. You'll end up tolerating mistreatment because you think this is the best you can get. The narcissist doesn't create this wound, but they exploit it ruthlessly. They make you prove your love constantly. They make you jump through hoops. They threaten to leave whenever you set a boundary. And your wound makes you comply. Shadow work here means facing the abandonment fear, sitting with it instead of running from it, realizing that being alone isn't the worst thing, that you can survive someone leaving, that your fear of abandonment is running your life and keeping you in situations that are destroying you. It means building a relationship with yourself strong enough that other people leaving doesn't devastate you. It means understanding that someone leaving doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you weren't compatible, or they weren't capable, or the timing was wrong, or 1,000 other things that aren't about your fundamental worth. We talked about the savior complex already, but there's a shadow aspect to this that people don't like to acknowledge. When you're constantly trying to save people, you're drawn to broken people who need fixing. There's often something in it for you, not consciously or maliciously, but there's a payoff. Maybe being the savior makes you feel needed. Maybe it gives you purpose. Maybe it allows you to avoid looking at your own issues by focusing on someone else's. Maybe it makes you feel superior, even if you'd never admit that. Maybe it allows you to avoid the vulnerability of being in a relationship between equals. If you're always the helper, the fixer, the strong one, you never have to admit you need help. You never have to be vulnerable. You get to feel good about yourself while avoiding intimacy. The thing is, relationships between equals are scary. When someone doesn't need you, they're with you by choice. They could leave or reject you. But when someone needs you, when you've positioned yourself as their savior, there's a codependency that feels like security. The shadow work is examining why you're drawn to people who need saving. What are you getting out of it? What are you avoiding by taking that role? What would it mean to be in a relationship where you weren't needed in that way? For a lot of people, the answer is terrifying. Because if you're not the savior and you're not fixing someone, then the relationship is just about whether you're lovable for who you are. And if you don't believe you are, being the savior is a way to guarantee someone will keep you around. Some people end up in narcissistic relationships because they can't tolerate conflict. Any disagreement feels dangerous. Any tension feels unbearable. So they appease, apologize, back down, accept unacceptable things just to keep the peace. This often comes from growing up in chaotic or volatile environments. Conflict meant danger. Keeping everyone happy meant survival. You learn to read moods, to manage other people's emotions, to be small and agreeable. Narcissists love this. They can do whatever they want because they know you won't push back. If you do push back, they'll escalate until you fold. They'll rage, guilt trip, play victim, whatever it takes. And because you can't tolerate conflict, you'll give in to make it stop. The shadow here is the part of you that's terrified of your own anger. That believes being angry or assertive makes you a bad person. That would rather be mistreated than risk conflict. Shadow work means learning that conflict is an abuse. That disagreeing doesn't mean the relationship is ending. That you have a right to be angry. That expressing your needs doesn't make you selfish. That tolerating mistreatment to avoid conflict isn't peace, it's just silent suffering. It means building the capacity to sit with discomfort, to let someone be upset with you, to say no and not crumble when there's pushback, to tolerate someone's disapproval without immediately trying to fix it. This is hard work because it goes against everything you learned about survival. But staying in patterns of appeasement will keep you trapped in relationships where you're never allowed to have needs or boundaries. Some people get a sense of identity from suffering, sacrificing, and being the person who endures more than anyone else could. Again, this isn't conscious. But there's a part of them that finds meaning in being the long-suffering partner. The person who stayed when anyone else would have left. The person whose love is so pure and strong that they can tolerate anything. Narcissistic relationships feed this identity. You get to be the victim and the hero simultaneously. You get sympathy from others. You get to feel morally superior. You get a story of endurance and sacrifice. But you're also in hell. And on some level, you're choosing to stay in hell because leaving would mean giving up the identity you've built around surviving it. The shadow work here is brutal. It means asking yourself, what am I getting out of this suffering? How does this serve me? What would I have to face about myself if I stopped accepting mistreatment? For some people, the answer is that being a martyr is easier than being responsible for their own happiness. Suffering at someone else's hands means you're not accountable for the state of your life. You're a victim of circumstances, not someone who needs to make hard choices. Leaving means taking responsibility, building a better life, facing the fact that you're capable and competent and don't need to suffer to have value. And that's terrifying for someone whose identity is built on endurance. So why does all this shadow stuff matter? Because you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. You can't change patterns you don't recognize. If you keep ending up with narcissists, the narcissists aren't the only problem. They're out there. They exist, and you can't control that. What you can control is why you're drawn to them, why you stay, what wounds you're trying to heal through them. Jung said integrating the shadow means bringing unconscious patterns into consciousness, owning the parts of yourself you've rejected, accepting that you have needs, fears, wounds that influence your behavior. It means being honest about your role in these dynamics, not to blame yourself, not to excuse their behavior, but to understand your vulnerability so you can heal it. The truth is narcissists will always exist. People with dark triad traits will always be out there. You can't fix them. You can't change them. What you can do is heal yourself enough that you're no longer a match for those dynamics. When you've done the shadow work and you've healed the wounds, narcissists lose their appeal. The love bombing feels fake instead of exciting. The push-pull feels exhausting instead of intense. The drama feels toxic instead of passionate. You recognize the patterns immediately and walk away before getting hooked. That's the goal. Not to become cynical or closed off, but to become whole enough that you're not vulnerable to these specific forms of exploitation. When you're getting out of a narcissistic relationship, everyone focuses on leaving, on healing, on moving forward. But there's this middle period that's absolutely brutal, and people don't prepare you for it. When you leave a narcissistic relationship, especially one that lasted years, you have this moment where you realize you don't know who you are anymore. And I'm not being dramatic. You genuinely forget. You spent so long molding yourself to their needs, managing their moods, suppressing your own preferences that when you're finally free, you're standing there like, wait, what do I actually like? What do I want? Who am I without this person? I watched my cousin go through this. She left her narcissist husband after 8 years, got her own apartment, was excited to finally have freedom. Then she called me crying 2 weeks later because she was standing in a grocery store and realized she didn't know what food she liked anymore. She'd been buying what he wanted for so long, accommodating his preferences, she'd completely lost track of her own. That sounds small, but it's everywhere. What movies do you like? What music? How do you spend a Saturday? What are your political views separate from theirs? What are your goals? Your dreams? Your boundaries? You've been so busy being what they needed that you erased yourself. And rebuilding that takes time. You have to experiment. Try things. Some will feel right. Some won't. You'll discover new parts of yourself. You'll rediscover old parts you'd forgotten. It's like dating yourself, figuring out who this person is. This identity crisis makes you vulnerable to jumping into another relationship too fast, because not knowing who you are feels uncomfortable. Having someone else define you again feels easier than doing the work yourself. Don't fall for that trap. Sit with the discomfort. Do the work of rediscovering yourself. Here's something therapists will tell you, but you won't really understand until you're in it. There's going to be a phase where you're just furious. Ragingly, intensely angry in a way that might scare you. At first, when you leave, you're often still making excuses for them, still seeing their side and feeling guilty. But as you heal, as the fog clears, you start seeing everything clearly. And you get angry. Angry at them for what they did. Angry at yourself for staying. Angry at friends and family who didn't intervene or who took their side. Angry at the time you lost. Angry at the version of yourself you became. Just angry at everything. This anger is actually healthy. It means you're done making excuses. You're done minimizing. You're seeing reality clearly and responding appropriately to how messed up it was. But it doesn't feel healthy. It feels consuming. You'll want to confront them. Tell them exactly what they did and how it affected you. Make them understand and apologize. Make them hurt the way they hurt you. Don't do it. They won't hear you. They'll just twist everything and make you the villain. They'll use your anger as proof you're unstable. You won't get closure from confrontation. The anger has to be processed differently. Therapy, journaling, talking to people who get it, physical activity, creating something, whatever works for you. But it has to come out somehow, because if you stuff it down, it'll come out sideways in ways that hurt you. My friend channeled her anger into training for a marathon. Every run was processing rage. By the time she crossed that finish line, she'd literally run through most of her anger. Other people write letters they never send. Some people do kickboxing. Find your outlet. The anger phase eventually passes. You won't be this angry forever. But you have to let yourself feel it instead of trying to skip to forgiveness, because someone told you that's what healing looks like. This one messes people up because it doesn't make logical sense. You're grieving someone who hurt you, someone you're better off without, who maybe never even really existed in the way you thought they did. But you're grieving anyway. You're grieving the future you thought you'd have, the relationship you thought you had, the person you thought they were, the version of yourself before this happened, the time you lost, the innocence you lost about how people can be. And people don't get it. They say, "Why are you sad? You should be happy it's over. They were terrible to you." And you know that. Logically, you know that. But grief isn't logical. Some days you'll miss them. Not the real them. The version they pretended to be during love bombing. The potential you saw. The moments that were good. You'll miss what you thought you had, even knowing it was never real. Let yourself grieve. Cry when you need to. Feel sad even though it doesn't make sense. Miss them even though you know you shouldn't. This is all part of processing. Fighting the grief just makes it last longer. There's also this weird grief for who you were before. You can't unknow what you know now. You can't unsee how people can operate. There's this loss of innocence that you'll carry forward. You'll never trust quite as easily. Never be quite as open. You've learned things about human nature you wish you hadn't. That's a loss worth grieving too. When you're finally ready to date again, there's this tendency to compare everyone to the narcissist. But here's what's sneaky about it. You don't just compare people negatively. You also compare them positively in ways that mess you up. Well, at least this person isn't yelling at me. At least they're not cheating. At least they show up when they say they will. You're comparing people to the absolute bottom of the barrel. And anyone who clears that incredibly low bar looks good. So you end up in relationships with people who aren't narcissists, but also aren't actually good partners. They're just not abusive. And you're so grateful for basic decency that you mistake it for love. Or you go the other way. Someone does something that vaguely reminds you of the narcissist and you panic. They forgot to text back for a few hours. Red flag, they're withholding attention. They had a bad day and were short with you. Red flag, here comes the devaluation. They want some alone time. Red flag, they're pulling away. You become hypervigilant to the point where you can't give healthy people a fair shot. Every normal human flaw looks like the beginning of a pattern. You're scanning for threats constantly. You can't relax. Finding the balance takes time. Learning what's an actual red flag versus what's normal relationship stuff. Learning what's a reasonable boundary versus what's you being triggered. Learning to trust your gut without letting your trauma run the show. This is another reason therapy is important. You need someone to help you reality check. Is this person actually problematic, or are you projecting? Is this boundary reasonable, or are you being controlling because you're scared? You can't always tell on your own. Last thing, even after you've left, even after you've blocked them, even after months or years, the hoovering attempts will come in waves. And they'll catch you off guard. You'll be doing great. Healed. Moved on. Happy. Then boom. A text from a new number. A message through a friend. A card in the mail. An email. A chance encounter. Something. And even though you're over them, even though you know better, there's this part of you that reacts. Your heart rate increases. You feel that pull. What do they want? Have they changed? Do they miss me? Should I respond? No. The answer is always no. Hoovering isn't about missing you. It's about control. About seeing if they still have access and getting supply. About not letting you fully escape. They'll try different tactics. Sometimes it's love bombing again. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I realize what I lost. Please give me another chance. Sometimes it's guilt. I'm struggling. I need you. Nobody understands me like you do. Sometimes it's rage. You ruined my life. You owe me. Sometimes it's breadcrumbs. Just a hey to see if you'll bite. Don't bite. Don't respond. Not even to tell them to leave you alone. Any response teaches them that if they try enough different approaches, eventually one will work. Block the new number. Delete the email unread. Return the card unopened. If they show up in person, don't engage. Say, I have nothing to say to you, and leave. Don't let them pull you into conversation. And don't feel bad about it. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them explanation. You don't owe them anything. You did the hard work of leaving and healing. Protecting that is your only responsibility. These hoovering attempts will get less frequent over time. Eventually they stop. Eventually they find new supply and forget about you. Eventually you're free. But in the meantime, stay strong. Every time you don't respond, you're reinforcing your boundary and your healing. That's the stuff nobody warns you about. Is that the identity crisis, anger, grief, comparison trap, and hoovering waves recovery isn't linear. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you feel worse before you feel better. But all of this is normal. All of this is part of the process. And all of this eventually passes. You come out the other side stronger, wiser, more yourself than you've been in years. You just have to get through the minefield first. All right, we've covered what narcissistic abuse looks like, why smart people fall for it, what wounds make you vulnerable, and the recovery minefield nobody warns you about. Now let's talk about what you do about it. And I'm going to be honest with you. There's no magic fix. There's no set of words that will make a narcissist suddenly develop empathy. There's no boundary so perfect they'll respect it. There's no amount of explanation that will make them understand what they did wrong. The only real solution is getting out and healing. But I know that's hard. I know some people reading this aren't ready to leave yet. I know some people are co-parenting with a narcissist and can't cut contact. I know some people work with one and can't quit their job right now. So let's talk about practical strategies for different situations. We touched on this earlier, and you can watch my previous video on that after you are done with this video. I've attached it here for you to see. The gray rock method is for when you can't go no contact, but need to minimize engagement. This is a concept from dialectical behavior therapy. Radical acceptance means fully accepting reality as it is, without fighting it or wishing it were different. With a narcissist, radical acceptance means accepting that they are who they are. They're not going to change, not going to apologize sincerely, not going to suddenly develop empathy, not going to take accountability, and they're not going to see your perspective. This isn't about excusing their behavior. It's about stopping the mental fight against reality. Stop thinking, they should understand, they should care, and they should treat me better. They're not going to, and that's the serious reality. Once you radically accept that, you can make clear decisions. You're not waiting for change. You're not giving them chances. You're responding to who they actually are, not who you wish they were. This is hard because acceptance feels like giving up hope. And in a way, it is. You're giving up hope that this person will become someone different. But that hope is what keeps you trapped. That hope makes you tolerate unacceptable behavior. That hope makes you believe lies and empty promises. Radical acceptance is freedom. When you accept they won't change, you stop wasting energy trying to make them. You stop explaining. You stop defending. You stop hoping. You just see reality clearly and act accordingly. Most people think boundaries are about controlling other people. They're not. Boundaries are about controlling yourself. A boundary isn't, you can't talk to me that way. A boundary is, if you talk to me that way, I will leave the conversation. See the difference? The first one tries to control their behavior. The second one establishes what you'll do in response to their behavior. With narcissists, boundaries aren't about getting them to respect you. They won't. Boundaries are about protecting yourself and following through with consequences. I don't engage in conversations where I'm being yelled at. I'm hanging up now. Then hang up. Don't warn multiple times. Don't give chances. They yell, you leave. Every time. Consistently. I need financial information by Friday for tax purposes. If I don't receive it by then, I'll file without your information and you can deal with the consequences. Then follow through. Don't remind. Don't beg. Don't threaten multiple times. Narcissists will test boundaries constantly. They'll push to see if you mean it. The first time you don't follow through, they learn your boundaries are negotiable. So you have to be consistent. Every time they cross the boundary, there's a consequence, and you implement it without discussion. This requires you to be okay with their reaction. They'll rage. They'll guilt trip. They'll play victim. They'll tell everyone you're unreasonable. Let them. Your boundary isn't about managing their emotions. It's about protecting yourself. If you're dealing with a narcissist in a legal context, co-parenting, or work situation, document everything. Keep records of conversations. Screenshot texts. Save emails. Keep a journal of incidents with dates and details. Record phone calls if legal in your state. Narcissists lie. They gaslight. They rewrite history. Documentation is your protection. When they claim they never said something, you have proof. When they accuse you of things you didn't do, you have evidence. When they try to manipulate a mediator or judge or HR department, you have records. This feels paranoid. But with someone who operates this way, documentation isn't paranoia. It's necessary protection. My friend went through a custody battle with a narcissist ex. She documented every missed pickup, every inappropriate text, every time he didn't follow the parenting plan. When he tried to claim she was preventing him from seeing the kids, she had 2 years of documentation showing the opposite. It saved her. Documentation also helps you maintain your own sanity. When they gaslight you about what happened, you can look back at your records and confirm you're not crazy. You're not misremembering. It happened the way you remember it. If you don't have kids or legal ties with this person, the best thing you can do is a clean break. No contact. None at all. Block them everywhere. Phone, email, social media, all of it. Tell mutual friends you don't want updates about them. Delete photos. Get rid of things that remind you of them. Cut every thread of connection. Narcissists will try to hoover you back. They'll show up, send messages through other people, create fake accounts, and have emergencies. Don't engage. Not even to tell them to leave you alone. Any response is supply for them. The first few weeks are brutal. You'll be tempted to check their social media, to reach out, to respond to hoovering attempts. Don't. Every time you engage, even negatively, you reset the clock on healing. People will tell you you're being extreme. They'll say everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe they've changed. You're being unforgiving. Ignore them. They don't understand what you dealt with. Your healing requires complete separation from this person. Over time, it gets easier. The urge to check on them fades. The memories lose their intensity. You stop wondering what they're doing or if they miss you. You build a life that doesn't include them and realize it's better. You need professional help to heal from narcissistic abuse. Not that you're broken, but because this stuff runs deep. Find a therapist who understands personality disorders and trauma. Not every therapist does. Some will try to get you to understand the narcissist's perspective or work on communication. That doesn't work here. You need someone who gets that you're dealing with abuse. Therapy helps you process what happened, helps you grieve, helps you work through the trauma bonding, helps you identify your wounds and heal them, helps you rebuild your sense of reality after gaslighting, helps you learn to trust yourself again. This isn't a quick process. Healing from narcissistic abuse takes time. You'll have setbacks. You'll have moments where you miss them, where you doubt yourself, where you're tempted to go back. A good therapist helps you navigate all of that. EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing therapy can be helpful for trauma. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help with the thought patterns you developed in the relationship. Somatic therapy can help with the nervous system dysregulation. Different approaches work for different people. The point is, you can't do this alone. And you shouldn't have to. Get help. One of the hardest parts of recovery is learning to trust again, to trust others and yourself. After narcissistic abuse, you're hypervigilant. You see red flags everywhere. You question everyone's motives. You can't relax into relationships because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. This makes sense. Your trust was violated in profound ways. Your reality was manipulated. You learned that people who claim to love you can hurt you deliberately. That's a hard thing to come back from. Rebuilding trust is gradual. It starts with small risks. Trusting someone with something minor. Seeing if they follow through. Slowly increasing vulnerability as they prove trustworthy. But it also means trusting yourself again. Trusting your perceptions. Trusting your judgment. Trusting that you can spot red flags now that you know what to look for. Trusting that you'll leave if someone mistreats you instead of staying and hoping they'll change. This is where the shadow work pays off. When you've healed your wounds, you trust yourself to not fall into the same patterns. You trust yourself to choose differently. You trust yourself to enforce boundaries. You trust yourself to leave at the first signs of abuse instead of the 100th. And slowly, you learn that not everyone is a narcissist, that there are people who can be trusted, that healthy relationships exist and you deserve one. Nobody tells you that life after leaving a narcissist can feel weirdly empty at first. The chaos was awful, but it was also constant stimulation. Drama, intensity, emotional highs and lows. Healthy relationships feel flat by comparison. Stable feels boring. Consistent feels unexciting. Your nervous system misses the activation even though it was hurting you. This is normal. You're detoxing from trauma bonding. You're relearning what healthy feels like. You're adjusting to a life where you're not constantly in fight or flight mode. Give yourself time. What feels boring now will eventually feel peaceful. What feels flat now will eventually feel stable. What feels unexciting now will eventually feel safe. You'll build a life that's yours. No walking on eggshells. No managing someone else's emotions. No wondering which version of them you'll get today. No sacrificing yourself to keep the peace. You'll rediscover if you are outside of that relationship. Hobbies you gave up. Friends you lost touch with. Parts of yourself you suppressed. Dreams you abandoned. You'll have hard days. Moments where you miss them, even knowing how bad it was. Moments where you doubt yourself. Moments where you're lonely. That's all part of healing. But gradually, you'll build something better. Gradually, you'll realize you're happier. Gradually, you'll understand why you had to leave. And eventually, you'll meet someone healthy and realize what you were missing. Real reciprocity. Real respect. Real love that doesn't require performing or proving or enduring. That's what's waiting on the other side of this. That's why the hard work of leaving and healing matters. That's why you're worth more than settling for someone who can't love you the way you deserve. You've spent this last hour and half learning about dark psychology, manipulation, trauma bonds, shadow work. You understand now how these dynamics work and why they're so hard to escape. Now it's time to do something with that knowledge. Assess where you are. Be honest about what you're dealing with. Make a plan. Reach out for help. You deserve better than this. And better is possible. But only if you're willing to do the hard thing and leave, if you're willing to face your wounds and heal them, and if you're willing to build a life that doesn't include someone who treats you like this. Don't forget to share this video with someone you know that needs it.